Aisha Monroe thought she was just doing her job when she helped the arrogant millionaire with his hotel room. Little did she know, Ethan Caldwell was already plotting her public humiliation. What started as a cruel bet between wealthy friends would become the most devastating night of her life, as Aisha walked into that glittering gala completely unaware she was the punchline to their twisted joke. But when the cameras flashed and the whispers began, something unexpected happened that would turn the tables on everyone who underestimated her strength. The woman they thought would crumble under their judgment was about to teach them all a lesson about dignity, grace, and the dangerous game of trying to break someone who refuses to be broken. What Ethan didn't count on was falling for the very woman he set out to destroy. And what Aisha didn't expect was that her greatest humiliation would lead to her most powerful transformation. The night that was meant to put her in her place would change both their lives forever, but not in the way anyone saw coming. If you're ready to see how this explosive story unfolds, hit that subscribe button and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know where my viewers are as we dive into this incredible journey together. The afternoon rush at the Grand Harbor Hotel always tested Aisha Monroe's patience, but today felt different. She stood behind the marble front desk, watching her team handle the chaos of VIP check-ins with the calm grace she'd taught them. At 26, she had worked her way up from housekeeping to supervisor, and she took pride in how smoothly her department ran. "Ms. Monroe, we have a situation in the penthouse wing," called Maria, one of her housekeepers, hurrying over with worry creasing her young face. Aisha set down her clipboard. "What's wrong?" "The guest in 2401 is upset. Something about his garment bag and the wrong room type. He's demanding." Aisha had dealt with demanding guests before. Wealthy people often thought money gave them the right to treat staff badly. She straightened her shoulders and headed for the elevator. "I'll handle it." The penthouse hallway was quiet except for the sound of raised voices coming from room 2401. Aisha knocked firmly on the partially open door. "Excuse me, sir. I'm Aisha Monroe, housekeeping supervisor. I understand there's been a problem." The door swung open, and she found herself looking at two men. One was shorter with slicked back hair and a smug smile. The other was tall, with dark hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his jaw was tight with frustration. "Finally," the tall man said. "I reserved a corner suite. This isn't a corner suite, and my garment bag for tonight's event is missing." Aisha kept her voice steady. "I'm sorry for the confusion, Mr. Caldwell. Ethan Caldwell." He said it like she should know the name. She didn't, and her expression didn't change. "Mr. Caldwell, let me check our system and see what happened." She pulled out her phone and accessed the hotel database. Behind Ethan, his friend snorted. "Good luck with that. We've been waiting 20 minutes. Aisha ignored him. After a moment, she looked up. "I see the issue. Your assistant requested a high floor with city views, but didn't specify corner. We have you in 2401, which has excellent views. The corner suite was booked months ago for a wedding party." Ethan's frown deepened. "That's not what I asked for." "I understand your frustration," Aisha said calmly. "As for your garment bag, let me call our concierge. Sometimes evening wear gets sent directly to our valet service to prevent wrinkles." She made the call while both men watched her. When she hung up, she smiled slightly. "Your garment bag is being pressed and will be delivered to your room within the hour. And Mr. Caldwell? Room 2401 actually has better views than the corner suite. The corner faces partially toward the building next door. Your room has unobstructed city views and harbor glimpse." Ethan stared at her for a moment. His friend Victor nudged him with a grin. "Well, would you look at that? Problem solved." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. "Thank you, Ms. Monroe. That's efficient." "Just doing my job," Aisha replied. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No, we're good." As she turned to leave, she heard Victor's voice behind her, amused and slightly mocking. "She didn't even blink at your name, man. Most people around here get all fluttery when they hear Caldwell." "Shut up, Victor." But Aisha caught the tone in Ethan's voice. It wasn't embarrassment, it was something else, something that made her walk a little faster toward the elevator. An hour later, Aisha was finishing her shift reports when her coworker Tanisha approached with wide eyes. "Girl, do you know who you just helped?" Mr. Caldwell in 2401? That's Ethan Caldwell, as in Caldwell Industries. His family owns half the buildings downtown. His mother's picture's in the society pages every week. Aisha shrugged. Rich people still need their garment bags. Tanisha laughed. You're something else. Most people would have been kissing up to him. I don't kiss up to anyone for doing my job right. As Aisha gathered her things, her supervisor, Mrs. Alvarez, appeared at her elbow. The older woman had been working at the Grand Harbor for 30 years and had taught Aisha everything about handling difficult situations with grace. How did it go with the guest complaint? Mrs. Alvarez asked quietly. Resolved. Room mix-up and missing garment bag, both handled. Mrs. Alvarez nodded, but her expression stayed serious. Good. Management is watching closely after that incident with Jennifer last week. We can't afford any complaints right now. Aisha knew what she meant. Jennifer, a housekeeper, had been fired after a guest complained she'd been rude for not accepting his inappropriate advances. Management had sided with the guest without question. I understand. I know you do, Mija. Just be careful. These wealthy guests sometimes think they own everything they see. That evening, Aisha was walking through the hotel lobby toward the employee exit when she heard her name called. She turned to see Ethan Caldwell approaching, dressed in a perfectly fitted tuxedo. His garment bag had been delivered, apparently. Ms. Monroe. Perfect timing. Aisha glanced around. The lobby was busy with guests heading to various evening events. She kept her professional smile in place. Mr. Caldwell, I hope everything worked out with your room. It did. Actually, that's why I wanted to speak with you. He moved closer and she caught the scent of expensive cologne. I wanted to apologize for being sharp earlier. You handled everything perfectly, and I was frustrated about things that had nothing to do with you. Apology accepted, she said simply. I'd also like to thank you properly. His smile was charming, practiced. There's a charity gala tomorrow night. I'd like you to be my guest. Aisha blinked. Whatever she'd been expecting, it wasn't this. That's very kind, but not necessary. I insist. You saved my evening, and I'd like to return the favor. The event supports children's literacy programs, very worthwhile cause. Something in his tone made her pause. It was too smooth, too rehearsed, like a sales pitch. Mr. Caldwell, I appreciate the gesture, but please, I've already arranged for a car service and address credit at Saks. All you have to do is say yes. The offer was generous. Too generous for someone who'd simply done her job. Aisha had learned to be suspicious of men who offered too much too quickly. Why? She asked directly. Why what? Why invite me? You don't know me. I helped you with a room mix-up. That's not worth a charity gala invitation. For just a moment, his smooth expression flickered. Maybe I'd like to get to know you. At a charity gala surrounded by your friends and family. It's a good way to see the city's philanthropic side. Aisha studied his face. There was something he wasn't saying, something that made her instincts hum with warning. She'd been down this road before with Marcus, her ex-boyfriend, who dated her like a secret for 6 months before introducing her to his friends as just someone he knew. But there was also something else, a stubborn part of her that refused to be intimidated by his money or social status. If he was playing some kind of game, she wouldn't make it easy for him. What time? She heard herself ask. His smile brightened. 7 o'clock. I'll have the car pick you up. And Aisha? He used her first name with easy familiarity. Wear whatever makes you feel beautiful. After he left, Aisha stood in the lobby for a long moment, wondering what she'd just agreed to. At home that night in her small but tidy apartment, Aisha told her best friend Lena about the invitation while they shared takeout Chinese food on her couch. He invited you to what now? Lena nearly choked on her lo mein. A charity gala. A charity gala. Lena set down her container and stared at her. Aisha, honey, this smells like a setup. What do you mean? Rich white boy invites the pretty black hotel worker to his fancy party. Girl, this is either some pretty woman fantasy or a really cruel joke. Aisha had been thinking the same thing, but hearing it out loud made her defensive. Maybe he's just being nice. Nobody's that nice. Especially not billionaires. He's not a billionaire. Millionaire, billionaire, whatever. The point is, people like him don't usually notice people like us unless they want something. Aisha picked at her fried rice. Lena was probably right, but something in her rebelled against the idea of turning down the invitation just because she was afraid. What if I went anyway? What if you what now? What if I went? On my terms, I pay for my own dress, use my own car, and leave whenever I want. Lena stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Why would you want to put yourself through that? Because I'm not going to let him or anyone else make me feel like I don't belong somewhere. Aisha met her friend's eyes. If he's trying to make me look foolish, he's going to be disappointed. And if he's being genuine, then maybe I'll have a nice evening. And if it's something in between, then I'll handle it like I handle everything else, with my head up. Lena shook her head but smiled slightly. You're crazy. But if you're determined to do this, we're doing it right. We're going shopping tomorrow, and I'm helping you get ready. You don't have to. Yes, I do, because if you're walking into whatever this is, you're walking in prepared. The next morning, Aisha reported for her usual shift, trying to act normal. But word had somehow gotten out about her invitation, and she found herself the center of whispered conversations all day. I heard Ethan Caldwell asked you to the Morrison Foundation Gala, whispered Keisha from the front desk during their coffee break. Where did you hear that? Tanisha saw him talking to you last night. Girl, that man is fine and rich. You better lock that down. Aisha sighed. It's just one evening. One evening can change your whole life. But it was Mrs. Alvarez who gave her the most useful advice when she found Aisha organizing supply closets during a quiet afternoon moment. I heard about your invitation, the older woman said without preamble. Mrs. Alvarez, no judgment from me, mija. But let me tell you something. She leaned against the doorframe, her expression serious. I've been working around rich people for 30 years. Some are good, some are bad, most are somewhere in between. But they all have one thing in common. What's that? They're used to getting what they want, and when they invite someone from our world into theirs, it's usually because they want something specific. So you think I shouldn't go? I think you should go if you want to go, but go with your eyes open. Don't let anyone make you feel small. You belong anywhere you choose to be. That afternoon, Aisha and Lena went to a small boutique in Aisha's neighborhood, rather than the expensive store Ethan had suggested. They found a simple black dress that fit perfectly. Elegant without being too formal, beautiful without being flashy. You look amazing, Lena said as Aisha turned in front of the mirror. I look like me. Exactly. And that's all you need to be. The morning of the gala, Aisha worked a short shift, grateful for the distraction. But as evening approached, her stomach started to flutter with nerves. Ethan had sent a text with the pickup time and venue address, along with a message that read, "Looking forward to this evening." Lena came over to help her get ready, doing her hair in soft curls and helping with makeup that enhanced her natural beauty without changing who she was. Remember, Lena said as Aisha slipped into her dress, you're not trying to impress anyone. You're just being yourself. What if myself isn't enough for that world? Then that world doesn't deserve you. Just before 7, Mrs. Alvarez called. How are you feeling, mija? Nervous. Good. That means you care. But remember what I told you. If you walk into that room like you belong there, people will follow your lead. Confidence is the best accessory you can wear. The black car pulled up precisely at 7. As Aisha walked toward it, she took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Whatever this evening brought, she would face it as herself, no more, no less. The Grand Harbor Hotel ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white and gold, and the city skyline twinkled through floor-to-ceiling windows. Guests in elegant evening wear moved through the space with practiced social grace, their laughter and conversation creating a sophisticated backdrop. Aisha stepped from the car at the entrance, where photographers captured arriving guests and valet attendants guided limousines and luxury cars. She had expected to feel intimidated, but instead, she felt remarkably calm. Ethan appeared at her side almost immediately, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. You look beautiful, he said, and for the first time, his smile seemed genuine rather than practiced. Thank you. As they walked toward the entrance, Aisha was aware of heads turning. of whispered conversations that paused when she passed. She kept her chin up and her expression pleasant, neither seeking attention nor shrinking from it. "The Morrison Foundation does wonderful work," Ethan said as they entered the ballroom. "They've built 12 new libraries in underserved communities this year." "That's impressive." She looked around at the elaborate decorations and expensive champagne being served on silver trays. "This must have cost quite a bit to put on." "The goal is to raise more than we spend." A photographer approached, and Ethan positioned himself next to Aisha with practiced ease. The camera flashed, and she realized their picture would likely appear in the society pages. The thought should have worried her, but she found she didn't care. "Ethan!" a woman's voice called out, crisp and commanding. They turned to see an elegant woman in her late 50s approaching. She was beautiful in the way that money and good breeding could make someone beautiful, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, and perfectly cold. "Mother," Ethan said, his smile becoming more formal, "I'd like you to meet Aisha Monroe. Aisha, this is my mother, Marianne Caldwell." Marianne's gaze swept over Aisha with the efficiency of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly. "Ms. Monroe, how lovely." The words were polite, but her tone was anything but warm. "How do you know my son?" "We met at the hotel where I work," Aisha said simply. "I see." Marianne's smile was razor thin. "And what do you do there?" "I supervise housekeeping." Something flickered in Marianne's eyes, not surprise exactly, but a kind of satisfied confirmation. "How service-oriented of you." She turned to Ethan. "Darling, the Washingtons are asking for you. Something about the hospital board." It was clearly a dismissal. Ethan hesitated, glancing between his mother and Aisha. "Go ahead," Aisha said smoothly. "I'll be fine." As Ethan was led away by his mother, Aisha found herself alone in the crowd. She made her way to the bar and ordered a ginger ale, using the moment to observe the room. These people moved differently than the folks in her neighborhood. Everything was more controlled, more performed. Conversations happened in careful tones, smiles were precisely measured, and even laughter seemed choreographed. Well. So you're Ethan's mystery date." Aisha turned to find Victor, Ethan's friend from the hotel, approaching with 2 other men. All 3 had the same expensive confidence, the same amused expressions. "I'm Aisha," she said simply. "Victor Hale," he gestured to his companions. "This is James and Robert. We were just curious about you." "Curious about what?" "How you managed to catch Ethan's attention. He's usually pretty particular about—" Victor paused, his smile becoming sharper. "The women he brings to events like this." There was something in his tone that made Aisha's instincts sharpen, but she kept her expression neutral. "I didn't catch anything. He invited me, and I said yes." "Just like that?" "Just like that." James leaned forward slightly. "It must be exciting for you being here. All of this probably seems pretty glamorous compared to where you're from." The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. Aisha took a sip of her ginger ale and smiled. "It's beautiful," she said honestly, "though I imagine it takes a lot of work to put together. The staff here must be working incredibly hard tonight." Her response seemed to confuse them. They had clearly expected her to gush or to seem overwhelmed. "Yes, well," Robert said awkwardly, "the help always works hard at these things." "The help?" Aisha's voice remained pleasant, but something in her eyes sharpened. "You mean the people who made this beautiful evening possible?" Victor's smile returned. "Ethan said you had spirit." Before Aisha could ask what he meant by that, Ethan returned, appearing at her elbow with perfect timing. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying a note of warning, "I see you've met Aisha." "We were just getting acquainted," Victor said innocently. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sure you were. Aisha, would you like to see the auction items?" As he led her away from the group, Aisha glanced back to see Victor whispering something to his friends that made them all chuckle. "I apologize for them," Ethan said quietly. "They can be, difficult. I've dealt with difficult before." They spent the next hour moving through the party. Ethan introduced her to various people, business associates, family friends, charity board members. Most were politely curious, some were openly appraising, and a few seemed genuinely kind. But Aisha couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, evaluated, like she was part of some test she didn't understand. During dinner, seated at Ethan's table with 6 other couples, the conversation flowed around topics she recognized but didn't participate in. Vacation homes in the Hamptons, children at private schools, investments, and market trends. "And where do you live, dear?" asked Eleanor Whitmore, an older woman with kind eyes and a genuine smile. "Park Heights," Aisha said, naming her neighborhood. "Oh." The woman next to Eleanor, younger, with perfect blonde hair and a pinched expression, looked confused. "Is that downtown?" "It's about 20 minutes from here," Aisha said easily. "How quaint," the blonde woman said, clearly having no idea where Park Heights was, but sensing it wasn't the right kind of neighborhood. "It's a good community," Aisha said. "Lots of families, small businesses. People look out for each other." Eleanor leaned forward with interest. "That sounds wonderful. There's something to be said for real community." But the blonde woman had already turned to talk to someone else, having apparently lost interest once she realized Aisha didn't live anywhere impressive. As the evening progressed, Aisha began to notice a pattern. Conversations would include her briefly, then drift to topics that excluded her. Not rudely, these people were too well-bred for obvious rudeness, but consistently. When she excused herself to visit the restroom, she was grateful for the quiet moment away from the careful social performance. But as she walked down the hallway, she heard voices coming from an alcove near the powder room. "Can't believe he actually brought her," someone was saying. "Victor said it was some kind of bet," came another voice. "Something about watching her realize she doesn't belong." Aisha froze, her heart suddenly pounding. That's cruel, even for Ethan. Oh, please, she's a hotel worker. She probably thinks this is her big break into society. Someone needs to show her reality. Aisha pressed herself against the wall, feeling sick. What exactly did Victor say? That Ethan wanted to see how she'd handle being out of her depth. Apparently she didn't act impressed enough when she met him, so he decided to educate her about her place. The voices were moving away, but Aisha had heard enough. She stood in the hallway for a long moment, her breathing shallow and her hands shaking slightly. This was Marcus all over again, but worse. At least Marcus had hidden his shame. This was deliberate humiliation, performed in front of hundreds of people. She thought about leaving immediately, calling a cab, and disappearing before anyone noticed. But something in her rebelled against the idea of running. These people expected her to crumble, to prove their assumptions right. Instead, she took a deep breath, checked her reflection in the powder room mirror, and walked back to the ballroom with her head high. When she returned to the table, Ethan looked up with a smile that no longer seemed charming. "There you are. I was starting to worry. Just needed some air." As the evening continued, Aisha watched Ethan with new eyes. Every introduction felt calculated. Every conversation seemed designed to highlight how different she was from his world. When Victor made a toast about new experiences and unexpected guests, Ethan laughed along with everyone else. The final blow came when they stepped onto the ballroom's terrace for some air. The night was warm, and the city lights spread out below them like stars. "Thank you for coming tonight," Ethan said, moving closer to her. "I hope you've enjoyed yourself." "It's been educational." Something in her tone made him pause. "Aisha, is everything all right?" She turned to face him, and in that moment decided she was done pretending. "Was this a joke?" she asked quietly. "What?" "This whole evening. The invitation, the dress credit, the car service. Was it some kind of bet?" Ethan's face went very still. "What are you talking about?" "I overheard some people talking. About how you wanted to see how I'd handle being out of my depth. About teaching me my place." For a moment, he didn't respond. Then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of guilt that told her everything she needed to know. "Aisha, it's true, isn't it?" He ran a hand through his hair, and when he looked at her again, she saw the truth in his eyes. "It started—" He stopped, clearly struggling. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. But it was a joke. At first, Victor made a stupid comment about you not being impressed by my name, and I made a stupid bet." Aisha felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What kind of bet?" "That I could bring you here and you'd be overwhelmed. You bet on my humiliation. I didn't think of it that way. I don't know what I thought. But then I met you. Really met you and what? You decided to go through with it anyway? No. Aisha, listen to me. Tonight wasn't about the bet. I invited you because I wanted to spend time with you. She stared at him and for a moment almost believed him. But then she remembered all the careful introductions, all the conversations designed to exclude her, all the moments when he'd seemed to be watching her reaction rather than simply enjoying her company. I need to leave, she said quietly. Let me drive you. No, the word came out sharper than she'd intended. I'll get my own ride. Aisha, please, let me explain. But she was already walking away, back through the ballroom toward the exit. She kept her composure until she was outside, until she was in the taxi she'd called, until she was safely in her own apartment. Only then did she allow herself to cry. Aisha woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a hollow feeling in her chest. She'd barely slept, replaying every moment of the previous evening, analyzing every smile and conversation for signs she should have caught earlier. The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was how briefly she'd believed Ethan might actually be interested in her. Her phone had buzzed with messages throughout the night. She'd ignored them all. Lena knocked on her door at 8 in the morning, carrying coffee and bagels. I saw the pictures online, she said without preamble, wrapping Aisha in a fierce hug. You look beautiful, but your face tells me everything I need to know. They sat on Aisha's small couch while she told Lena everything, the whispered conversation she'd overheard. Ethan's admission about the bet, the way his friends had looked at her like she was entertainment. I want to find this Victor person and key his car, Lena said when Aisha finished. That won't help anything. It would help me feel better. Lena squeezed her hand. What did Ethan say exactly? That it started as a bet but became something else, that he wanted to spend time with me. Do you believe him? Aisha was quiet for a long moment. It doesn't matter what I believe. He still invited me to humiliate me. Even if he changed his mind later, he still went through with it. You're right. Lena's voice was gentle but firm. You deserve better than someone who would gamble with your feelings. After Lena left, Aisha forced herself to get ready for work. She needed the normalcy, the routine, the reminder that her real life existed outside of crystal chandeliers and champagne. But from the moment she walked into the Grand Harbor Hotel, she could feel eyes on her. Conversation stopped when she passed, then resumed in whispers. By lunchtime, she'd heard 3 different versions of the story, each more dramatic than the last. I heard he spent $50,000 on her dress, whispered one housekeeper. Someone said they're engaged, added another. My cousin works at the Four Seasons, and she heard he's been bragging about his charity case girlfriend. Aisha kept her head down and focused on her work, but the whispers followed her everywhere. When her supervisor called her into the office at 2 o'clock, she knew it wasn't good news. Aisha, sit down, said Mr. Patterson, the assistant manager. He was a thin man who always seemed nervous about something. Is there a problem? Well, that's what I need to discuss with you. He shuffled papers on his desk without looking at her. There's been some attention surrounding your attendance at last night's gala. What kind of attention? Photos on social media, mentions in the society blogs. Management feels that when our staff becomes the subject of public discussion, it can reflect poorly on the hotel's professional image. Aisha felt heat rise in her cheeks. Are you saying I did something wrong by accepting an invitation from a guest? Not wrong, exactly, but it does raise questions about appropriate boundaries between staff and guests. Mr. Patterson, I attended the event on my own time, wearing my own clothes, and I conducted myself professionally. What exactly are you concerned about? He finally looked at her, his expression uncomfortable. The general manager received a call this morning. Apparently, someone complained about staff becoming too familiar with high-profile guests. Someone complained about me specifically? The caller didn't give details. They just expressed concern about maintaining proper standards. Aisha knew exactly who had made that call, though she couldn't prove it. Someone from last night's party, maybe Marianne Caldwell, maybe one of Victor's friends, had decided to make her pay for daring to enter their world. What does this mean for my job? She asked quietly. For now, we're adjusting your schedule. You'll be working day shifts only, no VIP floors, and we'll be monitoring the situation closely. It was a punishment disguised as a precaution. Aisha would lose her evening shift differential pay, miss out on the tips that came from serving wealthy guests, and be effectively demoted without cause. I understand, she said, standing up. Aisha, this isn't personal. Of course it is, she met his eyes, but I understand. She spent the rest of her shift in a fog, mechanically going through the motions while anger and hurt warred in her chest. It wasn't fair. She'd done nothing wrong, but she was being punished while Ethan faced no consequences at all. At 5 o'clock, as she was gathering her things, security guard Jonah Reed approached her. He was a quiet man in his early 30s who'd always been respectful to the housekeeping staff. Can I walk you to your car? He asked. I take the bus. Can I walk you to the bus stop then? They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the corner where Aisha caught her ride home. For what it's worth, Jonah said quietly, I think what they're doing is wrong. You've been nothing but professional since I've worked here. Thank you. That means something. Just be careful, okay? Sometimes when powerful people feel embarrassed, they look for someone to blame. That evening, Aisha sat in her apartment trying to focus on a book, but the words kept blurring together. When her phone rang, she almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Mrs. Alvarez's name. Mija, how are you? I've been better. I heard about the schedule change. I'm sorry. They talked for a few minutes about work, about the unfairness of the situation, about how quickly gossip could poison a workplace. Then, Mrs. Alvarez said something that cut straight to the heart of what Aisha was feeling. You know, I've been thinking about something all day. This morning, you walked into that hotel with your head up, same as always. You didn't act ashamed or guilty. You didn't owe anyone an explanation. But maybe I should have. No. You should never apologize for refusing to make yourself smaller to make other people comfortable. After they hung up, Aisha felt something shift in her chest. The hurt was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. She refused to be ashamed of who she was or where she came from. And she especially refused to hide because some wealthy people couldn't handle seeing her in their space. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Despite herself, her heart jumped, hoping it might be Ethan with a real explanation, a genuine apology. Instead, it was from a number she didn't recognize. Hope you enjoyed your 15 minutes of fame. She blocked the number and turned off her phone. The next morning, Aisha arrived at work to find Ethan waiting in the lobby. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much either. When he saw her, he stood up quickly. Aisha, please, can we talk? Every eye in the lobby was on them. Aisha was aware of her coworkers watching, of guests slowing their steps to listen, of the front desk staff pretending to be busy while actually recording every word. This isn't the place, she said quietly. Then tell me where. Please, 5 minutes. Jonah appeared at her elbow, professional but firm. Is there a problem here? No problem, Ethan said quickly. I just wanted to speak with Ms. Monroe. Hotel policy requires that guest communications with staff go through proper channels, Jonah said smoothly. Ethan's jaw tightened with frustration, but he couldn't argue without causing a scene. Then how do I? I'll think about it, Aisha said, cutting him off. If I decide to talk to you, I'll let you know. She walked away before he could respond, but she felt his eyes on her until the elevator doors closed. Lena called during her lunch break, voice tight with anger. Please tell me you didn't agree to see him. I didn't agree to anything. Good. Because I've been doing some research on this Ethan Caldwell, and he's exactly what we thought he was. What do you mean? Rich boy who's never had to face consequences for anything. I found 3 different gossip blog mentions of him and various women over the past 2 years. Always someone different, never serious, always someone from outside his social circle. Aisha's stomach clenched. Meaning what? Meaning you were never anything special to him. You were just the latest entertainment. After work, Aisha took a different route to avoid the main lobby, but Ethan was waiting by the employee entrance. This time, there were no witnesses, no audience to perform for. I know you don't want to see me, he said immediately, but I need to explain. You already explained. It was a bet. It was a stupid bet that I regretted the moment I saw you at the gala. He stepped closer, his voice urgent. Aisha, you have to believe me. The way you looked, the way you handled yourself, the way you talked to people. It wasn't what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone who would be impressed by the money, by the setting. Someone who would act grateful or overwhelmed. You wanted me to perform being small. I wanted... He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. I don't know what I wanted, but I know that spending time with you last night was the most real conversation I've had in months. Aisha studied his face. He looked genuinely distressed, genuinely sorry. But she'd learned not to trust pretty words from handsome men. Even if that's true, you still bet on my humiliation. You still invited me to a party where your friends could laugh at the poor black girl who thought she belonged. They weren't laughing. Yes, they were. Her voice was quiet but firm. Maybe not out loud, but they were. And you let them. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You're right. I let them. And I hate myself for it. Hating yourself doesn't undo the damage. Then tell me how to fix it. Aisha looked at him, really looked at him. She saw regret there and what might have been genuine feeling, but she also saw someone who was used to getting what he wanted, someone who expected forgiveness to come as easily as everything else in his life. You can't fix it, she said finally. Some things can't be undone. She turned to walk away, but his voice stopped her. What if I told you that being with you last night was the first time in years I felt like myself instead of performing being Ethan Caldwell? She paused but didn't turn around. Then I'd say you should have thought about that before you made me part of your performance. That evening, alone in her apartment, Aisha allowed herself to really cry for the first time since the gala. Not just for the humiliation or the unfairness, but for the loss of something that might have been real. For a few hours at that party, before she'd learned the truth, she'd felt a connection she hadn't experienced since Marcus broke her heart. Her phone rang. This time it was an unknown number, but when she answered, she heard Ethan's voice. Don't hang up, please. How did you get this number? I asked the concierge. Aisha, I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm asking for one chance. Not to fix what I did, I know that's impossible. But to show you who I am when I'm not trying to impress anyone. Why should I care who you are? Because I think you felt it too. What happened between us when we talked on the terrace before everything fell apart, that wasn't part of any bet, that was real. Aisha remembered the moment he was talking about. For just a few minutes before she'd learned the truth, they'd talked about simple things, favorite books, childhood memories, places they'd like to travel. His guard had been down, and she'd seen something genuine beneath the polished surface. One coffee, she said before she could stop herself, in a public place, 1 hour. Tomorrow? Friday after I get off work. The coffee shop on Elm Street near the community center. If you show up acting like the person you were at that party, I'll leave. I understand. And Ethan. She took a deep breath. This isn't about giving you what you want. This is about me deciding what I need to know. After she hung up, she immediately called Lena. You did what? Lena's voice went up an octave. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like you're setting yourself up to get hurt again. Maybe, but I need to know if any of it was real. Lena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentler. Okay, but I'm going to be at that coffee shop too. Not at your table, but close enough to intervene if he says anything that makes me want to throw hot coffee at him. Lena, non-negotiable. If you're doing this, you're doing it with backup. Friday afternoon, Aisha finished her shift and changed into jeans and a simple sweater. She wanted to look like herself, not like she was trying to impress anyone. As she walked to the coffee shop, her stomach fluttered with nerves. The coffee shop was busy with the after-work crowd, filled with people from the community center next door and students from the nearby college. It was comfortable, familiar territory, her world, not his. Ethan was already there when she arrived, sitting at a small table by the window. He was dressed casually, jeans and a button-down shirt, and he looked almost nervous. When he saw her, he stood up quickly. Thank you for coming. I said I would. He gestured to the chair across from him. I got you a latte. I remembered you mentioned liking coffee with cinnamon. It was a small detail, but it surprised her that he'd remembered. She sat down and wrapped her hands around the warm cup. So, she said, talk. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. Then he leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. I've been thinking about what you said, about Betting on your humiliation. You're right. That's exactly what I did. And it was cruel and stupid and beneath who I want to be. But you did it anyway. But I did it anyway. He didn't try to make excuses. I've been around people like Victor my whole life. People who think their money makes them better than everyone else, who treat service workers like they're invisible or interchangeable. I told myself I wasn't like that, but when it came down to it, I acted exactly like them. Aisha sipped her latte and studied his face. Why? Why did I do it? Why did you think it was okay to treat me that way? He was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the answer. Because it was easier than admitting I was attracted to you, he said finally. When you didn't act impressed by my name or my money, when you just did your job and treated me like any other guest, it threw me off balance. Victor noticed, and instead of just admitting that you'd gotten my attention, I went along with his stupid joke. You were embarrassed that you liked me. I was embarrassed that I liked someone who didn't need anything from me. His voice was quiet. Everyone in my world wants something. Access, money, connections, status. But you just wanted to do your job and go home. It made me realize how shallow most of my relationships are. Aisha felt something shift in her chest, but she wasn't ready to let her guard down yet. So you invited me to that party to what? Test whether I'd become as shallow as everyone else? I invited you because Victor dared me to, and I was too much of a coward to admit that I actually wanted to spend time with you. He met her eyes. But somewhere between making that bet and picking you up that night, it stopped being about proving anything to him and started being about getting to know you. Then why didn't you call off the bet? Because I'm used to getting what I want without having to be vulnerable. I thought I could have it both ways, impress my friends and spend time with you. He shook his head. I was wrong about everything. Aisha watched his face as he spoke. There was something different about him here, in this coffee shop that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, surrounded by students and community workers instead of wealthy socialites. He seemed smaller somehow, more human. What happened after I left? She asked. I went home and realized I'd lost something real for something completely worthless. Then I found out about your job situation. Aisha's back straightened. What about my job situation? The complaint to your hotel. I know it came from someone at the Gala. I've been trying to figure out who, but it doesn't matter who. What matters is that I'm being punished for accepting your invitation. That's why I wanted to see you. I want to help. No. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. You don't get to swoop in and fix this. That's not how this works. But if I cause the problem, then you live with the guilt. But I solve my own problems. He stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching people come and go from the coffee shop. Finally, Aisha spoke. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you made that bet with Victor, what did you think would happen? What was the best-case scenario in your mind? Ethan considered the question carefully. Honestly, I thought you'd be impressed by everything. The venue, the people, the glamour. I thought you'd be grateful and maybe a little overwhelmed. And I thought that would somehow prove to Victor that I could make anyone fall for the Caldwell charm. And then what? Then nothing. It would have been one evening, and we'd never see each other again. So I was never supposed to be a person to you. Just a prop in your ego game. The words hit him like a physical blow. God, when you say it like that, that's what it was. You're right, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am genuinely, deeply sorry. Aisha finished her latte and set the cup down. I have to ask you something else, and I need you to be honest. Okay. If I hadn't overheard that conversation, if I hadn't confronted you, would you ever have told me the truth? The question hung between them for a long moment. Ethan's face went through several expressions: surprise, discomfort, and finally, reluctant honesty. I don't know, he said quietly. I want to say yes, but I honestly don't know. I was already starting to regret the whole thing, but whether I would have been brave enough to confess, he shook his head. Probably not. It wasn't the answer she'd wanted, but she respected him for giving it honestly. At least you're not lying to make yourself look better. I've done enough lying. They sat quietly again, the sounds of the coffee shop filling the space between them. Finally, Aisha glanced at her watch. My hour's up. I know. He didn't move to leave, though. Can I ask you something now? Go ahead. Do you think there's any chance you could ever forgive me? Aisha studied his face. She saw regret there, and shame, and what looked like genuine remorse. But she also remembered the sound of laughter when Victor made his toast, remembered the way Ethan's friends had looked at her like she was entertainment. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe. But forgiveness isn't something you can earn by wanting it badly enough. I understand. And even if I did forgive you, that wouldn't mean I'd want to see you again. I understand that too. Aisha stood up and Ethan rose with her. For a moment they stood facing each other in the warm light of the coffee shop, and she felt an echo of what she'd experienced on that terrace before everything fell apart. Thank you for being honest, she said. Thank you for giving me the chance. As she walked toward the door, his voice stopped her one more time. Aisha, for what it's worth, the person you were that night, confident, gracious, completely yourself, you were the most beautiful woman in that room. She turned back to look at him. The person I was that night is the person I am every day. The only thing that changed was the setting. I know that now. Outside the coffee shop, Lena fell into step beside her. So, how was it? He was honest about all of it. And I still don't know if that's enough. As they walked home together, Aisha felt something she hadn't expected. A tiny seed of possibility, not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe, eventually, the chance to find out if anything real could grow from such a damaged beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Thank you again for listening. I'll respect whatever you decide. For the first time in days, she didn't delete his message immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, Aisha settled into her new work routine. The day shift was quieter, with fewer demanding guests and more regular cleaning schedules. She missed the energy of the evening shift and the extra money, but she found an unexpected peace in the calmer pace. Mrs. Alvarez checked on her regularly, offering quiet support without making a fuss. Jonah made a point of saying hello when their paths crossed, and even some of the front desk staff had begun treating her with new respect, as if standing up for herself had somehow elevated her in their eyes. The gossip about the gala had mostly died down, replaced by newer drama about a celebrity guest who'd trashed their suite and a kitchen scandal involving missing champagne. Aisha was grateful to fade back into the background. She hadn't heard from Ethan since their coffee meeting, which surprised her. She'd expected him to push for another chance, to send flowers or gifts or grand gestures. His silence was somehow both disappointing and respectful. On a Thursday afternoon, while she was restocking supply closets, her phone rang. The caller ID showed the hotel's main number. Aisha Monroe speaking. Ms. Monroe, this is Jennifer Walsh, the new guest relations coordinator. Could you come to the front desk when you have a moment? There's been a request. Aisha's stomach tightened. Requests from guests usually meant complaints, and complaints could mean trouble. She found Jennifer at the concierge station, a friendly woman in her 40s who'd started at the hotel just last month. What can I help you with? We received a call from the Caldwell Industries office. They'd like to schedule a service recovery meeting with you regarding the incident from 2 weeks ago. Aisha's heart skipped. What kind of service recovery meeting? Standard procedure when there's been a guest relations issue. They want to discuss the situation and ensure it doesn't happen again. It's scheduled for tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the executive conference room. Do I have a choice? Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. Well, technically it's voluntary, but management strongly encourages participation in service recovery initiatives, which meant it wasn't really voluntary at all. Aisha nodded, her mind racing. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. It should be brief. That evening, Aisha called Mrs. Alvarez. A service recovery meeting? The older woman sounded suspicious. That's not standard procedure for what happened to you. What do you think it means? I think someone's trying to control the narrative. Be very careful what you say, mija, and don't sign anything without reading it twice. Friday afternoon, Aisha put on her best work clothes and made her way to the executive conference room on the hotel's mezzanine level. She'd never been in this part of the building before. The carpets were thicker, the furniture more expensive, everything designed to impress important visitors. She knocked on the conference room door and entered to find 3 people waiting: Jennifer Walsh, Mr. Patterson from hotel management, and Ethan. Her step faltered for just a moment before she composed herself. "Good afternoon," she said calmly, though her heart was pounding. "Ms. Monroe, thank you for coming," said Mr. Patterson, gesturing to a chair across from where Ethan sat. "Mr. Caldwell requested this meeting to address the recent situation." Aisha remained standing. "What exactly is being addressed?" Ethan spoke for the first time, his voice carefully neutral. "I wanted to clarify that your attendance at the Morrison Foundation Gala was entirely appropriate and that you conducted yourself with complete professionalism." "I see." Aisha looked between the 3 faces watching her. "And this required a formal meeting because—" "Because," said Mr. Patterson, clearly uncomfortable, "there were concerns raised about staff guest boundaries, and Mr. Caldwell wanted to ensure there were no misunderstandings about your conduct." Aisha understood immediately. This was Ethan trying to fix her work situation without her permission, using his family's influence to pressure the hotel management. Her jaw tightened. "Mr. Patterson, could I speak with you privately?" The assistant manager looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. Mr. Caldwell, Ms. Walsh, would you excuse us?" When they were alone, Aisha turned to face him directly. "What exactly has Mr. Caldwell told you about my conduct at the gala?" "He emphasized that you were a perfect guest, that you represented the hotel well, and that any concerns about your behavior were unfounded." "And in return for this clarification?" Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "Well, there was mention of the Caldwell Group's upcoming conference bookings. Of course, Ethan had leveraged his family's business to pressure the hotel into reversing her punishment. It was exactly the kind of high-handed solution she'd told him she didn't want." "Mr. Patterson, I appreciate Mr. Caldwell's concern for my reputation. But I need you to understand something. I didn't ask for this meeting, and I don't need anyone to speak for my professionalism." "Ms. Monroe, I've worked here for 4 years. My record speaks for itself. If the hotel wants to change my schedule or duties, that's their right. But I won't be part of some arrangement that makes me look like I need special protection." Mr. Patterson stared at her in confusion. "I'm not sure I understand. I'm saying thank you, but no thank you. My work situation will resolve itself through proper channels, not through pressure from wealthy guests." She turned and walked toward the door, then paused. "You can tell Mr. Caldwell that I appreciate his concern, but this is not the kind of help I want." She opened the door to find Ethan standing in the hallway, clearly having heard at least part of the conversation. "Aisha, don't." She kept walking toward the elevator. He followed her. "I was trying to help. I told you I solved my own problems. Your problems exist because of me. My problems exist because some people can't handle seeing me in spaces they think belong only to them." She pushed the elevator button harder than necessary. "You trying to fix it with your family's money just proves their point." "What point?" The elevator arrived and she stepped inside. Ethan moved to follow her, but she held up a hand. "That I don't belong, that I need special treatment, that I can't handle myself in your world without a wealthy protector." The elevator doors started to close, but Ethan caught them. "That's not what I meant, but that's what it looks like. And how it looks matters." This time, when the doors closed, he didn't stop them. Aisha made it through the rest of her shift, but her hands were shaking slightly as she gathered her things. She felt angry and frustrated, and somehow more hurt than she'd been after the gala. At least then, his motivations had been selfish. Now, he claimed to be helping her, but he'd done it in exactly the way she'd asked him not to. Lena was waiting in the employee parking lot when Aisha finished work. "You look like you want to hit something," Lena observed. "I do." As they drove to Lena's apartment, Aisha told her about the meeting and Ethan's attempted intervention. "So he threw his weight around to fix your schedule?" Lena asked. "Basically." "And you turned it down?" "Of course I turned it down." Lena was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask why?" "Because it's not real if it comes from his influence instead of my merit. Because accepting help from the person who caused the problem makes me look weak. Because—" Aisha's voice caught slightly. "Because I can't tell the difference between him trying to help me and him trying to control the narrative to make himself feel better." "Those are all good reasons," Lena said gently. Are they? Or am I just being stubborn? Maybe both, but stubborn isn't always wrong. That weekend, Aisha spent Saturday cleaning her apartment and Sunday visiting her grandmother in the nursing home across town. Her grandmother had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12, and their weekly visits were sacred time. You look tired, baby, her grandmother said as they sat in the facility's garden, enjoying the warm afternoon. Work's been stressful. Want to talk about it? Aisha told her grandmother a simplified version of recent events, a wealthy guest who'd invited her to a party, complications that had affected her job, decisions about trust and forgiveness. Her grandmother listened without judgment, the way she always had. Sounds like this man hurt you, she said when Aisha finished. He did. And now he wants forgiveness. He says he's changed. Her grandmother was quiet for a long moment, watching birds move through the garden. When I was about your age, I worked for a wealthy family downtown. The lady of the house was cruel, treated me like I was invisible most days, but sometimes she'd be kind. Gave me her old clothes, let me take home leftover food. Aisha had never heard this story before. I spent years trying to figure out if she was good or bad, if her kindness meant something, or if her cruelty was who she really was. You know what I learned? What? People aren't puzzles to be solved. They're just people, capable of both good and bad choices. The question isn't whether someone's fundamentally good or bad, it's whether they're choosing to do better. How do you tell the difference between someone who's actually changing and someone who just wants you to think they are? Time, her grandmother said simply. Real change shows up in actions, not words, and it shows up consistently over time, even when nobody's watching. Monday morning, Aisha arrived at work to find a small envelope in her employee mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note on simple stationery. Aisha, I apologize for the meeting on Friday. You made it clear you didn't want my interference, and I ignored your wishes. That was wrong. I've withdrawn any influence regarding your work situation. What happens with your schedule should be between you and the hotel management, as you wanted. I hope you can forgive this latest mistake. Ethan. It was a simple apology. No dramatic gestures or expensive gifts. Somehow that made it more meaningful than flowers would have been. At lunch, Mrs. Alvarez found her in the break room. I heard about Friday, the older woman said, settling into the chair across from her. News travels fast. It always does, but I also heard something else. What? Your schedule's being restored. Full hours, evening shift differential, VIP floors, starting next week. Aisha looked up in surprise. Really? Really, and before you ask, I don't think it has anything to do with your rich friend. I think management realized they overreacted to some anonymous complaint. Or they realized the complaint was motivated by spite rather than legitimate concerns. Either way, you're back where you belong. That evening, Aisha stood in her apartment holding Ethan's note, debating whether to respond. Part of her wanted to maintain the distance to protect herself from further disappointment. But another part appreciated that he'd listened to her and backed off when she'd asked him to. She picked up her phone and typed a simple message. Thank you for stepping back. I appreciate the apology. She sent it before she could change her mind. His response came an hour later. You were right to call me out again. Thank you for not giving up on the possibility that I might eventually learn. Despite herself, she smiled. Wednesday evening, Aisha was restocking towels on the VIP floor when she heard familiar voices coming from the elevator bank. Her stomach clenched as she recognized Victor's laugh, followed by the sound of other men talking loudly about a poker game. She ducked into the supply closet, hoping to avoid an uncomfortable encounter. Through the crack in the door, she watched Victor and two other men walk past, heading toward one of the penthouse suites. Told you Ethan's lost his mind over that hotel girl, one of them was saying. It's embarrassing, Victor replied. He actually cut me off because I made a joke about her. 20 years of friendship. Gone because he's having some kind of midlife crisis. Maybe it's a phase, said the third man. Rich guys sometimes get weird about slumming it. God, I hope so. The last thing we need is him bringing her around permanently. Their voices faded as they continued down the hallway, but Aisha remained in the supply closet, her heart pounding. She thought about Ethan's apology note, about his promise to respect her boundaries, about the possibility that he might actually be changing. But she also thought about his friends, about the world he came from, about how easy it would be for him to slip back into old patterns when the novelty of being with her wore off. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Working late? Hope your evening shift is going well." It was from Ethan, a simple check-in, the kind of message you might send to someone you cared about. She stared at it for a long moment before responding. "Just finishing up. How was your evening?" "Quiet. I stayed in and read. Much better than the alternative social obligations." She almost smiled at that. Alternative social obligations? "Poker night with people I'm discovering I don't actually like very much." Her smile widened. He'd chosen to skip Victor's gathering, chosen to stay home rather than fall back into old patterns. "Good choice," she typed back. "I thought so too. Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Would you be willing to have coffee again? Same place, same rules, just... I'd like to see you." Aisha stared at the message for a long time. She thought about her grandmother's words about time and consistency. She thought about Ethan's note and his decision to skip poker night. She thought about the fact that he was asking instead of assuming, respecting her boundaries instead of pushing past them. "Saturday afternoon," she finally typed. 2:00. "Thank you." She slipped her phone back into her pocket and finished her shift, feeling something she hadn't experienced in weeks: cautious hope. Saturday afternoon, Aisha arrived at the coffee shop to find Ethan already there, reading a book. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was warmer than she'd expected. "You came," he said, standing up. "I said I would. I wasn't sure you meant it." They ordered their drinks and settled at the same table they'd occupied before. This time, the silence between them was less tense, more thoughtful. "How's work been?" he asked. "Better. My schedule got restored." "I'm glad, and I want you to know I had nothing to do with that." "I know. Mrs. Alvarez confirmed it." They talked about small things, books they'd been reading, movies they'd enjoyed, changes in the neighborhood. It was the kind of conversation Aisha had imagined they might have had if they'd met under different circumstances. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan said after they'd been talking for about 30 minutes. "Sure. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about betting on your humiliation, and I realized something that makes it even worse." Aisha waited, not sure she wanted to hear this. "I've been surrounded my whole life by people who perform for my money, my connections, my status. When you didn't do that, when you just treated me like a regular person with a room problem, it was the first genuine interaction I'd had in months. And instead of appreciating it, instead of protecting it, I turned it into entertainment for people who've never had a genuine moment in their lives." That's a pretty harsh assessment of your friends. It's an accurate assessment. I've been thinking about that too. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been evaluating my relationships, really looking at who I spend time with and why." He met her eyes. "Most of them don't actually know me, and I don't know them either. We just perform wealth and status at each other." "That sounds lonely." "It is lonely. I just didn't realize how lonely until I spent one evening with someone who was completely herself." Aisha felt her heart soften slightly, but she kept her expression neutral. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I already started. I ended things with Victor permanently. I've been declining social invitations that are just about being seen with the right people. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing being Ethan Caldwell." "And who is that?" "I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out." They talked for another hour, and by the time they prepared to leave, Aisha felt something shifting inside her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that he was making an effort to be different. "Ethan," she said as they stood outside the coffee shop. "Yeah?" "That thing you said about not knowing your friends. I think I understand what you mean, but changing your social circle isn't the same as changing yourself." "I know, but it's a start." "It is," she agreed. "A start." As she walked home, Aisha thought about her grandmother's words about time and consistency. One coffee date wasn't enough to prove real change, but it was enough to make her curious about what might come next. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for giving me another chance to just talk to you. It means more than you know." This time, she responded immediately, "Thank you for respecting my pace. Same time next week?" "I'd love that." For the first time since the gala, Aisha fell asleep that night without anger in her heart. There was still hurt, still caution, still a long road ahead if they were going to build something real. But there was also possibility, fragile and tentative, like the first green shoots after a harsh winter. It would have to be enough for now. Over the next month, Saturday afternoons became a routine. Aisha and Ethan met at the same coffee shop, always for exactly 2 hours, always in the same public space where she felt safe and comfortable. Their conversations gradually deepened, moving from surface topics to real thoughts about life, family, dreams, and disappointments. Ethan told her about the pressure of living up to his father's legacy, about feeling trapped by expectations he'd never chosen. Aisha shared stories about growing up with her grandmother, about working multiple jobs to put herself through community college, about the pride she took in earning her supervisory position through merit rather than connections. "You know what I admire about you?" Ethan said during their fourth Saturday meeting. "What?" "You know exactly who you are. You never apologize for it or try to be someone else to make other people comfortable." "It took me a while to get there," Aisha admitted. "I used to try to fit in wherever I was, to be what people wanted me to be." "What changed?" She thought about Marcus, about all the times she'd made herself smaller to accommodate his discomfort with her background, her opinions, her dreams. "I got tired of disappearing, and I realized that if someone couldn't handle the real me, then what they felt wasn't really about me anyway. That's brave. It's necessary." Their conversations weren't always serious. Ethan had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and she found herself laughing more than she had in months. When he told her about his disastrous attempt to cook dinner for himself the week before, she laughed so hard she nearly choked on her latte. "You ordered pizza after burning water?" she asked, wiping tears from her eyes. "I didn't burn the water. I burned the pot because I forgot the water was in it, and it all evaporated." "That's even worse." "Hey, I'm learning. I successfully made scrambled eggs yesterday. Congratulations, you've achieved the cooking level of a college freshman." But it was during their fifth meeting that something shifted between them. Ethan arrived looking tired and frustrated, and when Aisha asked what was wrong, he hesitated before answering. "My mother wants to have dinner with me tomorrow night. She says we need to discuss my recent behavior." "Meaning me?" "Meaning you. She's heard about our coffee dates." Aisha felt her stomach tighten. "How?" "This city's smaller than it seems when you're part of certain circles. Someone saw us together and mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to her. And she's not happy about it." "She's never happy about anything that doesn't fit her plans for my life." Aisha studied his face. "Are you going to the dinner?" "I have to. But I want you to know that whatever she says, whatever pressure she puts on me, it won't change how I feel about getting to know you." It was the closest either of them had come to acknowledging that these coffee dates had become more than just friendly conversations. Aisha felt her heart speed up. "How do you feel about getting to know me?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, his green eyes serious. "Like I'm finally meeting someone real in a world full of performances. Like, I want to keep learning about who you are when you're angry, when you're happy, when you're worried, when you're excited." "Ethan, I know it's complicated. I know I hurt you and that trust takes time. But I also know that I care about you in a way that's completely different from anything I've felt before." Aisha's chest tightened with emotion. She wanted to trust the sincerity in his voice, but she also remembered how easily he'd betrayed her trust before. "I care about you too," she said quietly. "But caring about someone and being able to trust them aren't the same thing." "I know. That's why I'm trying to earn your trust instead of just asking for it." "How did the dinner with your mother go?" Aisha asked the following Saturday. Ethan's expression darkened. "About as well as you'd expect. She thinks I'm having some kind of breakdown and that you're taking advantage of my temporary confusion." "Charming." "She offered to set me up with 3 different appropriate women this week. She's planning a dinner party next weekend specifically to introduce me to the daughter of a family friend." Aisha felt a familiar stab of insecurity. "And?" "And I told her I wasn't interested, that I'm already spending time with someone who matters to me." How did she react to that? She said a lot of things I won't repeat, but the general theme was that I'm throwing my life away for a phase that will pass. What if she's right? The question slipped out before Aisha could stop it. What if this is just a phase? What if you get tired of having to defend your choices and go back to dating women who fit into your world? Ethan leaned forward, his expression intense. Aisha, look at me. She met his eyes. This isn't a phase. This isn't rebellion. This isn't me trying to upset my mother or prove a point to my friends. This is me realizing that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. How do you feel about me? Like I want to know everything about you. Like I want to share everything about myself. Like I want to build something real with you, not just have you fit into my existing life. Aisha's breath caught. Ethan, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything from you. I know I have to prove that I'm different from who I was that night. But I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. They stared at each other across the small table, and Aisha felt the last of her walls crumbling. She was scared, terrified actually, but she was also tired of protecting herself from something that might be genuine. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared too. What if we try this and you realize your mother was right? What if I don't fit into your life the way you think I will? What if you do? What if we fit together in ways neither of us expected? That evening, Aisha called her grandmother. Sounds like you're at a crossroads, baby, her grandmother said after listening to Aisha describe her conversation with Ethan. I don't know what to do. What does your heart tell you? That I'm falling for him. But my head says I'm setting myself up to get hurt again. Both of those things can be true at the same time. So what do? You decide whether the possibility of love is worth the risk of heartbreak, and only you can make that choice. After hanging up, Aisha sat in her apartment thinking about courage and vulnerability and second chances. She thought about Ethan's consistency over the past month, about the way he'd respected her boundaries and listened to her concerns. She thought about the way he looked at her when they talked, like she was saying something important, even when she was just telling him about her day. She picked up her phone and sent him a text. Would you like to have dinner sometime? Not coffee. Actual dinner. His response came back immediately. Are you asking me on a real date? I think I am. Then yes. Absolutely yes. They decided on a small Italian restaurant in Aisha's neighborhood, somewhere comfortable and unpretentious where they could talk without feeling like they were on display. When Ethan arrived to pick her up, he was holding a small bouquet of sunflowers. You remembered, Aisha said, surprised and touched. You mentioned they were your favorite when we were talking about your grandmother's garden. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. He'd been listening, really listening, to the details of her life. The restaurant was warm and inviting, with checkered tablecloths and the kind of authentic Italian music that made you feel like you were in someone's family dining room. They ordered wine and pasta and talked about everything except the weight of what this dinner meant. Tell me something I don't know about you, Ethan said over dessert. What do you want to know? Anything, something real. Aisha thought for a moment. I wanted to be a teacher when I was little. Elementary school. I loved the idea of helping kids discover that they were smart and capable. What happened to that dream? Money happened. I needed to work right after high school to help my grandmother pay for her medications. Community college was all I could afford, and even that took me 5 years because I could only take 1 or 2 classes at a time. Do you ever think about going back? Finishing your education degree? Sometimes, but it feels too late now. It's not too late. You're 26, not 96. Easy to say when you don't have bills and responsibilities. Ethan was quiet for a moment. You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make it sound simple. It's okay. Most people don't understand what it's like to choose between your dreams and survival. Is teaching still your dream? Aisha considered the question. Maybe. Or maybe my dream evolved. I like what I do now, managing people, solving problems, making sure things run smoothly. Maybe there are different ways to help people reach their potential. You're good at that. I saw it that first day when you handled my room situation. You were calm and professional, but you also made me feel like you actually cared about solving the problem. I did care. That's what good service is, treating people like their problems matter, even when they're small problems. It's also what good leadership is. After dinner, they walked slowly back toward Aisha's apartment building, neither wanting the evening to end. The night was warm, and the streets were busy with people enjoying weekend activities. "Can I ask you something?" Aisha said as they reached her building. "Of course." "That night at the gala, before I found out about the bet, there were a few minutes on the terrace when we just talked about books and places we wanted to travel. Was any of that real?" Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. "That was the most real I'd been with anyone in years. When your guard was down, and mine was too, when we were just two people talking about things that mattered to us, that was completely real. I felt it too. That's what made finding out about the bet so devastating. For a few minutes, I thought I'd met someone who saw me. I did see you. That's what terrified me. You weren't playing any games or trying to impress me. You were just yourself, and it was beautiful and honest and everything I didn't know I was looking for." They stood on the sidewalk outside her building, the weight of 6 weeks of careful rebuilding between them. "Ethan." "Yeah? I'd like to try this. Really try it. Not just coffee dates and careful conversations. I'd like to see if we can build something real together." His face lit up with a smile that was pure joy. "Really? Really? But I need you to understand something. Anything. I won't be your secret and I won't be your rebellion. If we do this, we do it honestly, openly, as equals. That means your family, your friends, your world, they all have to accept that I'm part of your life, or this won't work. I understand. And if anyone ever makes me feel small or unwelcome again, if anyone treats me like I don't belong, I won't stay and fight. I'll just leave. I won't put myself through that again." Ethan's expression grew serious. "I would never let anyone treat you that way. You can't control other people's behavior. You can only control your response to it. Then I promise you this. If anyone disrespects you, they lose access to me. My mother, my business associates, anyone. You matter more than maintaining relationships with people who can't see your worth." Aisha studied his face in the streetlight, looking for any sign of doubt or reservation. She found none. "Okay then," she said softly. "Okay? Let's see what happens when we stop being so careful with each other." Ethan stepped closer, and for the first time since that disastrous night at the gala, Aisha let herself really look at him. Not as a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, not as someone she needed to protect herself from, but as a man she was choosing to trust. "Can I kiss you?" he asked quietly. "Yes." When his lips met hers, it was nothing like the smooth, practiced charm she'd expected. It was hesitant and genuine and full of questions that would take time to answer. But it was also full of possibility, of the promise that maybe, with patience and honesty and courage, they could build something worth the risk. 3 months later, Aisha and Ethan stood outside an elegant restaurant in downtown, preparing to meet his mother for dinner. It was the first time Marianne had agreed to see them together since the gala, and only after Ethan had made it clear that Aisha was a permanent part of his life. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said, straightening his tie nervously. "Yes, I do," Aisha replied, checking her appearance in the restaurant's window. "If this is going to work, I can't avoid her forever. She might not be warm. I'm not expecting warm. I'm expecting civil. There's a difference." Inside, they found Marianne already seated at a corner table, elegant as always in a tailored dress that probably cost more than Aisha made in a month. She stood as they approached, her smile polite but distant. "Ethan, Ms. Monroe." "Mrs. Caldwell," Aisha replied evenly. The dinner was tense but civil. Marianne asked polite questions about Aisha's work, her family, her interests. Her tone never warmed, but it never turned cruel either. Aisha answered honestly and directly, neither trying to impress nor allowing herself to be intimidated. The turning point came when Marianne mentioned a charity fundraiser she was organizing for literacy programs. "We're having trouble reaching the communities we want to serve," she said. "The outreach isn't working as well as we'd hoped." "What kind of outreach are you doing?" Aisha asked. "The usual. Flyers, announcements through community centers." "Are you going to the communities? or asking them to come to you. What do you mean? Aisha leaned forward slightly. In my neighborhood, people are suspicious of charity events that feel like they're being done to the community rather than with it. If you want real participation, you need community leaders involved in the planning, not just the execution. That's actually an excellent point, Marianne said, sounding surprised. Do you have experience with community outreach? I volunteer with the literacy program at my community center. I've seen what works and what doesn't. For the first time all evening, Marianne looked at Aisha with something approaching respect. The conversation continued, and gradually, Aisha saw glimpses of the woman underneath the social armor. Marianne was sharp, dedicated to her causes, and genuinely concerned about making a difference. She was also accustomed to being the most knowledgeable person in the room, and she seemed intrigued to find herself talking to someone who could challenge her assumptions. When they left the restaurant, Marianne's goodbye was still formal, but less cold. Thank you for dinner, she said to Ethan, then turned to Aisha. Ms. Monroe, I'd be interested in hearing more of your thoughts about community engagement. Perhaps you'd be willing to consult on our outreach strategy. It wasn't friendship, but it was a beginning. I'd be happy to help, Aisha replied. In the car afterward, Ethan was quiet until they reached Aisha's building. That went better than I expected, he said finally. She's not as terrible as you made her sound. She liked you. She respects me. That's different, but it's enough to work with. Ethan turned to look at her. You know what I realized tonight? What? You didn't change yourself to fit into that room. You stayed exactly who you are, and somehow that made the room change around you. Rooms don't change, people do. Sometimes. My mother's changing, I can see it. Your mother's learning that she can't control everything. That's not the same as changing. And me? Am I changing or just learning? Aisha studied his face in the dim light from the street lamp. Over the past few months, she'd watched him become more honest, more thoughtful, more willing to admit when he was wrong. She'd seen him stand up to friends who made dismissive comments, choose quiet evenings with her over flashy social events, and slowly build a life that reflected his values rather than his bank account. You're becoming who you actually are instead of who you thought you were supposed to be, she said finally. That's the best kind of change. 6 months after their first coffee date, Ethan asked Aisha to move in with him. She said yes, but with conditions. They would find a place together that belonged to both of them, somewhere that reflected their shared life rather than his family legacy. They chose a converted warehouse loft in a diverse neighborhood, close enough to downtown for Ethan's work, close enough to Aisha's community for her volunteer activities, modern enough to feel fresh but warm enough to feel like home. On moving day, as they unpacked boxes and argued about where to put furniture, Aisha found herself thinking about that night at the Gala, about how angry and hurt she'd been, about how certain she'd been that Ethan represented everything wrong with privilege and power. What are you smiling about? Ethan asked, catching her expression as she unwrapped her grandmother's quilt. Just thinking about how wrong we both were about each other. How so? You thought I'd be impressed by your money and status. I thought you were just another entitled rich boy who saw people like me as entertainment. We were both wrong. We were both half right, too. You did want to impress me with your world, and I was suspicious of your motives. But that wasn't all we were. Ethan set down the lamp he'd been unpacking and came to sit beside her on their new couch. So what are we? We're two people who had to learn how to see each other clearly, who had to figure out how to build trust after it was broken, who had to choose each other over and over again until it became natural. And now? Aisha looked around their new living room, at the mix of his expensive furniture and her grandmother's antiques, at the photographs from their travels together and the books they'd shared, at the life they were building piece by careful piece. Now we're home, she said simply. Ethan leaned over and kissed her forehead. I love you, Aisha Monroe. I love you too, Ethan Caldwell. Outside their windows, the city buzzed with evening activity. Inside their loft, two people who had started with hurt and mistrust were building something genuine and lasting. It hadn't been easy and it hadn't been quick, but it had been real. And sometimes, Aisha thought as she curled up against Ethan's side, real was worth waiting for. Epilogue, 1 year later. The second annual Morrison Foundation Gala was in full swing, but this time, Aisha entered the ballroom with confidence instead of caution. She wore a deep blue dress that complemented her skin tone beautifully, and her hand rested comfortably in Ethan's as they moved through the crowd. "Ms. Monroe," Eleanor Whitmore approached with a warm smile. "How lovely to see you again. I've been following the community literacy program you helped Marianne develop. Brilliant work." "Thank you. It's been wonderful seeing the program grow." They chatted for a few minutes about the literacy initiative, which had become one of the Foundation's most successful programs. When Eleanor moved on to greet other guests, Aisha found herself face to face with Victor. He'd clearly had too much to drink, and his smile was sharp with old resentments. "Well, if it isn't the hotel girl who managed to stick around," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Aisha felt Ethan tense beside her, but she remained calm. "Hello, Victor. You look well. I have to admit, I didn't think you'd last. Most of Ethan's charity cases don't." "That's enough," Ethan said quietly, stepping forward, but Aisha placed a gentle hand on his arm, stopping him. "It's fine," she said, then looked directly at Victor. "I understand why you might think that. You've probably never seen a relationship built on mutual respect instead of mutual need." Victor's face flushed. "Mutual respect? Do you have any idea how much money his family has spent cleaning up the social mess this relationship has caused?" "The only mess I see here is someone who's too drunk to remember his manners," Aisha replied evenly. Before Victor could respond, Marianne appeared at their small circle. Over the past year, she and Aisha had developed a working relationship that had slowly grown into something approaching genuine respect. "Victor," Marianne said coolly, "I think you've had enough to drink for one evening. Perhaps you should call your driver." It was a clear dismissal from someone whose social opinion mattered more than his protests. Victor looked around the circle, at Ethan's protective stance, at Aisha's calm dignity, at Marianne's cold disapproval, and apparently decided to cut his losses. "This family's lost its mind," he muttered, walking away. "I'm sorry about that," Marianne said to Aisha. "Victor's always been crude, but alcohol makes him worse." "It's all right. Some people need time to adjust to change." Marianne studied Aisha for a moment. "You've handled this past year with remarkable grace. I want you to know that I've noticed." It was the closest thing to an apology or acceptance that Aisha was likely to get from Marianne, and she appreciated it for what it was. Later, as they danced to the small orchestra the Foundation had hired for the evening, Ethan pulled Aisha closer. "I'm proud of you," he murmured in her ear. "For what?" "For handling Victor with more class than he deserved, for building a relationship with my mother despite how she treated you initially, for making me want to be better than I was. You made yourself better. I just gave you a reason to try." "Same thing." As the music slowed, Aisha looked around the ballroom, at the same crystal chandeliers and elegant decorations that had intimidated her a year ago, at the same wealthy guests who had whispered about her presence. But this time, she belonged here, not because she'd changed herself to fit in, but because she'd helped change what belonging meant. "Can I tell you a secret?" she said to Ethan. "Always. I'm happy, really, truly happy. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop or protecting myself from disappointment. I'm just happy." Ethan spun her gently as the song ended, then pulled her back into his arms. "Good," he said, smiling down at her, "because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Aisha took one last look around the ballroom. A year ago, this place had represented everything she thought she could never have: acceptance, belonging, love without conditions. Tonight, she realized that she'd been wrong about what she wanted. She didn't need to belong in this world. She needed to build a world where she and the people she loved could belong together. And that's exactly what she'd done.